The great David Katz, everyone.
Good
Hi,
to be with
David.
you, Mark.
You know, I mentioned that this time last week, you and I had checked off on the Guantanamo deal that was made. You know, it looked like that long simmering situation, decades of the guys who unapologetically planned 9/11. The deal was done, and now it appears that that deal is being reviewed again. Now it was on the table, off the table. Is that kind of what happened?
Mark, I said then last Thursday afternoon that it was very fraught and very controversial. And it turned out that the Secretary of Defense was traveling at the time that it was announced by the attorneys with the Department of Defense who were handling it, this Guantanamo litigation, not by the Department of Justice, but by the Department of Defense, which meant that the person over it was the Secretary of Defense. He came back from his trip, reviewed it, and by the next day, Friday, he'd repudiated it. I believe he has the authority to repudiate it. And what I was wondering at the time, if someone at the Department of Defense who was unfriendly to the Harris campaign had actually approved that, because you wonder if anyone didn't have the political sense to realize the Republicans would run on that. Not on how difficult it was back and forth, the waterboarding coming out, embarrassing us around the world in other capitals with other countries. But the aspect of it that the death penalty was now off the table and the reaction that there would be to the death penalty being taken off the table. And I asked myself, what's so urgent about it? Why does this have to be decided? This case has gone on for over 20 years against KSM. Why does it have to be decided 3 months before the election when Trump can run on it? And I think the Secretary of Defense had many reasons not to approve it, to say just go on with the litigation. But he did not approve it. And it's taken an issue off the table that they were going to try to batter Biden and then, of course, Harris, because they're going to try to batter Harris on the Biden-Harris record. Took it off the table. And as I say, it's very controversial. I mean, a lot of people don't believe in the death penalty for anyone. A lot of people believe in the death penalty, certainly a lot more than I do. And then there's a middle group that thinks, wow, if anyone deserves the death penalty, isn't it KSM? Thousands of people murdered, in 9/11 and intentionally murdered and wanted to be murdered by KSM is how it appears. If he doesn't get the death penalty, who does? And if he can embarrass the country by bringing things out, number one, let him bring it out, Mark, if that's the truth. But the other thing is that, Biden can certainly resolve this in November. I think he's going to resolve 2 things or 3 things in November, Mark. I think he's going to figure out a way to give a pardon or commutation to his son, Hunter. I think that he's going to figure out a way to make this deal happen in November. And I think he's going to try to close Guantanamo as his legacy. I think that's what Biden has in mind. I think he would see it as a real accomplishment. I think he sees Guantanamo as something that really makes us look bad throughout the world. And he's probably been told by a lot of our allies that it makes us look bad. Not our enemies, but by our allies, that it makes it look bad around the world. At the same time, this fellow and the other 2 are, as you say, and people say, well, they're self-confessed that they did it under torture. I think they have an awful lot more evidence against KSM and these other 2, keeping out anything that was derived from torture. I think they have compelling cases certainly against him. I haven't really analyzed the case against the other 2, but I mentioned last week that they had a warrant for this KSM's arrest before anything happened on 9/11. He was trying to blow up planes back in the 90s.
Yeah, he has a pretty good resume when it comes to terrorism and, wanton horror. So this is interesting, and I love your predictions because you've actually reinforced predictions that you've made. That is to say, one of which was the Hunter Biden thing, which made total sense when I remember the day you laid it out. I thought, oh my God, it's just so obvious. I just can't believe that I hadn't realized it at the time. But
can we
this
talk
is
about
fascinating.
Hunter Biden for just a minute?
Sure.
People are dwelling on Hunter Biden less, of course, because his dad is not running against Trump. Kamala Harris is. But his trial on the tax evasion is about to begin in Los Angeles. We're going to talk about the Tom Girardi case, but we've got 2 big federal cases. Tom Girardi, which is going on right now in a federal court here, and then the Hunter Biden trial is going to begin in front of another judge that I've had cases in front of here in Los Angeles. Neither one is televised, but it looks like Hunter Biden's is really going to start, even though, I think if the judge continued it until November or December, it would never start at all. But Biden is not going to give his son a pardon before the election. I think that would be politically, I mean, that would just be stupid. You know, Trump wouldn't either. Trump would be planning to pardon his own son if he were in the same situation, but he'd also be planning to do it after the election. But the trial is about to start in September or October. And one of the things that's really interesting is that supposedly Biden's son went to a former head of the FBI, a Republican, Louis Freeh. He'd gone to this Louis Freeh, who has a private firm now, investigative firm, and Hunter said, "I'm in a world of trouble. Can you help me?" And the first person they looked to was actually Giuliani. This is a Giuliani story. Hunter really wanted Giuliani, and then eventually, he got other lawyers, other people. But I would think if the administration, if they want to play hardball and say, "Oh, well, look, Hunter Biden is in so much trouble," get a load of this. So is Giuliani, Trump's big friend. And I think that, fair is fair, right? They're apparently trying to really bring out like Hunter Biden and other things like that are going to try to embarrass, the current administration. But Giuliani is all over this case from what I've heard. This money that came from, it was this whole thing with Burisma. It's all of that stuff. Right. Anyway, and the idea is that he got the money from Burisma or from China for a no-show job. He got paid millions of dollars. What he was really getting paid millions of dollars for was to try to influence his daddy. Giuliani got a big pot of this money too. So, if they want to mix it all up. But that trial is about to begin in federal court in front of a judge. I think a very good judge, but I'm sure the newspapers will say one picked by Trump, appointed a couple of years ago. This will be the federal trial that looks like is really going to happen. Remember, this is the special prosecutor Weiss, who's the Republican picked by Trump but kept on by Biden. They had the deal in Delaware. This would have all gone away for a misdemeanor and pretrial diversion. Hunter Biden and his lawyer did not take it, had the big implosion in federal court in Delaware. And now instead of having a misdemeanor and a diversion agreement that he could have had that was right in the palm of his hand, he started a big argument in court. It all fell apart. And now here he is found guilty in the Delaware federal trial and now about to be facing tax evasion charges and supposedly for not paying tax on this money that the special prosecutor is going to try to show that Burisma, whatever, China is involved with. And it turns out Rudy Giuliani up to his eyeballs in it too. Well, allegedly, Mark.
And again, I will direct people who might have missed your analysis to just be reminded. And I think it's really, again, one of the things that just makes so much sense because you sort of were thinking to yourself, why wouldn't Hunter Biden take that deal? Why go through this litigation? Why go? And the answer is because in the back of his mind, he knows, or at least this could be an answer, that a pardon is coming. A pardon is inevitable. I mean, there's almost no arithmetic by which a pardon for Hunter Biden wouldn't happen. It'll happen after the election when it doesn't matter. And it will happen and has an inevitability to it. So if you know that, why not at least fight this in court? That's essentially what you were saying in your prediction from, well, now it's been a couple of months since you predicted that. It's such a, I think it's so spot on.
Well, thank you, Mark. He also had a financial angel, this Hollywood lawyer who was paying a lot of the bills. Hunter's lawyer says that much of his bill is unpaid, but many millions were paid. It's like Giuliani's lawyers, they're owed so much money. And then you look at how much they were paid and you thought, wow, I might not mind a case like this where I'm paid that much and still owed that much. Never a dull moment, Mark.
You mentioned another case, and I want to get to it in a second, that's beginning in Los Angeles. It's a really fascinating case, and I love that we can bring some of these legal cases that don't have to do with Trump or Giuliani or whatever to you, because this one is as sexy as they come. But I'm going to get to that in a second. Before I get to that, I want to ask you about...
Mark, the case with an 85-year-old attorney is sexy, but it is sexy.
Well, I mean, you can tell me. I think it is. I think it's a Real Housewives kind of thing. So anyway, are you telling me 85-year-olds aren't sexy anymore?
What? My God. On, Mark. I'm going to tell you a story about a 90-year-old when I tell you the story about Girardi. So
okay, so we'll get to Tom Girardi in a second. But what I do want to ask you about is this Google monopoly ruling. I thought it was pretty significant. Now, maybe it'll be appealed, and you can talk to us about that. But this is the first big tech sector anti-monopoly play on the part of the government. And it's a federal ruling. And essentially, they are saying in their ruling that Google is acting as a monopoly in search. And they have, by doing so, dealt a blow to competition and to the consumer.
Well, I mentioned the other day that I almost took a clerkship when I was coming out of law school in 1980 with a judge in the Southern District of New York, New York City, federal judge who had a 2-year clerkship, and it involved one of these huge antitrust cases. And my friends say, you're not that much of a tech guy. You're not that much of a science guy. You're going to lose your mind with that 2-year clerkship. I ended up not taking it. And then I got this great clerkship in Washington, D.C. that was for a shorter period of time, and it all worked out. These cases are very boring. They're very intense in terms to understand them, but the impact is huge. You know, they broke up the AT&T monopoly, and when they did, that's why we have our cell phones and we have the world that we live in today. If the phone company could have kept its monopoly, would it have really developed in this way? Probably not. You know, so they really entered they paved the way for competition. And then MCI started to fight with AT&T, and that further broke up. My judge did have that case in my shorter clerkship in Washington, D.C. He had a case called MCI against AT&T 2. There'd been a case in Chicago. So these antitrust cases can have a huge impact. They had another one against Microsoft. They thought Microsoft would dominate the world forever. And then, of course, Apple and everything else came along. So this one is, of course, huge because Google is the monopoly of our time, right? It's the whatever. It's like the cases 100 years ago when the railways were completely dominated, or the steel industry. And so they say we haven't really had that many significant antitrust cases, and this ruling certainly is extremely important. And I have no reason to think that it won't stand. It sounds like a very good judge and a very cogent analysis. And as I understand the allegation, what Google does is it pays billions of dollars so that it comes up first. So if you buy an Apple phone, the Google search comes up first. They have a big story that you can go through 5 or 6 different things on your phone, and you can eventually search, the internet, not by Google. But the reality is they make it so convenient. It's so at hand that you search by Google that 90% of the searches are by Google. That is an incredibly dominant position. And they maintain that position by paying billions of dollars to companies like Apple so that Google comes up first. And then they use that, of course, the market power. As the judge said, they not only are monopolists, but they use their monopoly power to make even more money. So they raise their rates, as I'm sure a lot of your people who use Google, in my law firm, it's word of mouth, for all these years that I've been doing this, pretty much it's just word of mouth. But a lot of people, get their business, whether it's legal business or any other kind of business, through Google. And I don't know exactly what they do, but a lot of your listeners know a lot better than I do, how they use their market power, allegedly, to raise rates, to gouge people, to treat them very unfairly and anti-competitively. And so the remedy will probably be that they have to stop paying these billions of dollars to these companies. And so when you buy an Apple phone or something like that, it'll give you, let's say 7 or 8 choices, of which Google will only be one. And apparently that will have a huge impact on Google. I think Google's stock price went down quite a bit. I don't want anybody to trade on my information. I'm not one of those touters who they tell you what they think will then get you to buy. But I do understand that Google's price went down, and it makes sense. If this doesn't work, and it seems to me classically anti-competitive, and that Google has fended it off, obviously, and hired great lawyers and made as many arguments as they can, and they seem not to have worked. It seems like the truth is the truth, that they are a monopolist, and they're using their monopoly power to gouge consumers.
Well, exactly as you've said. I mean, it seems self-evident, but we will see. But huge ruling. So I'm glad we got to that Google monopoly ruling. Now, let me ask you about this case that's developing in Los Angeles. It's not one, it has strains of stuff that we've seen in other cases. I'm thinking of like the Avenatti case, where, he was siphoning off a lot of money that was supposed to go to his clients from various settlements. But this guy, Tom Girardi, his fraud trial is beginning, and he's a former Real Housewives of Beverly Hills husband. That's why I say it's kind of got a sexy feel. It's got a celebrity shimmer to it, this trial. He is 85, and you can help maybe distinguish between that which is just dust and uh, things designed to obscure the truth, and that which is nuggets of truth that actually point to what really is going on here.
What are just the shiny objects? Well, Mark, I should say this. I'm a working federal criminal defense attorney, and I never ever talk about my cases, and I never will. But I have a trial pending in front of the same judge. It's set for November, in front of this same judge, the Honorable Josephine Staten is her name. She's a federal judge. She's very experienced. She's very thorough. She has this case. So I was actually in the courtroom yesterday. I was standing, 4 or 5 feet away from Tom Girardi. He walked in, he walked out. I heard him because you couldn't help but hear it, talking to his lawyers in a loud enough voice that you could hear it just sitting in the courtroom. And the story that I did want to tell just very quickly was there was a fellow named Bill Robles, and I'm looking over and I'm thinking to myself, I've seen this guy before. He's older than I remember him, but I've seen this guy before. He's a courtroom artist because it's federal court. He's a courtroom artist sitting there. And I went over and I said, Bill, how you doing? He gave me a big hug. He's 90 years old. For the people who think you can't keep doing what you're doing, right? And I know some people didn't want to vote for Biden at 81 after that disastrous debate performance. But here's a guy 90 years old. He's courtroom artist. And I guess those drawings that you see on the TV shows, because they don't have cameras in court, you're seeing Bill Robles' drawing. So I wanted to give a shout out. I look back at the drawing that he did, which is up in front of me, so your viewers can't see it. It's over my head. But it's me and Tommy Lasorda in a federal trial that I had. I'm asking him questions. It says, federal prosecutor David Katz pitching to Tommy Lasorda in the box.
Oh,
and
that's great. That's really great.
Star witness, in a trial in 1989. And there's Bill Robles. And there he is drawing the witnesses in the Girardi trial. So I just wanted to say that to give some local color. It's a huge, palatial federal courtroom. They're very new. It's that building down on Temple Street for people in Los Angeles. It's about 8 stories high. It's right next to Disney Hall. And it's just a big, beautiful courtroom. Actually, Bill Robles was complaining that it's so big, you have to sit so far back. It was hard for him to draw. He likes those smaller courtrooms.
Well, here is a question. I thought Tom, who is a defendant in this case, was supposed to be in such bad shape. Again, it was dementia and all these other things they've claimed now. How could he be walking in and out of the courtroom, as you've said?
Didn't you think a former journalist like me, the editor-in-chief of his high school newspaper, would have who, what, when, where, how, right? And that's one of the things I wanted to see. And at least for my money, he moved around pretty well. I mean, the judge had a motion that he was incompetent to stand trial. He says on account of his dementia and all of that. She heard expert testimony, and the judge decided that no, he was not incompetent. Now, he can argue to the jury that the prosecution hasn't met their burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, including bad intent on his part, fraudulent intent, because of his age. We all process information differently. What's the word I'm looking for? We form intent differently, and they're going to certainly try to show the jury that he had diminished capacity. That's a disfavored defense, and I don't think he's going to call an expert to say that he has like a mental defense, because that's very fraught and difficult and involves.
When you, not to interrupt, but when you say it's a disfavored strategy or disfavored defense, what do you mean by that?
Well, there was the famous Twinkie defense, where a supervisor in
San Francisco
killed Harvey Milk, and I think at least one other person, maybe the mayor. And I think that's how Feinstein, who was on the city council, became acting mayor. Anyway, he went to trial, and he said he was eating so many Twinkies at the time, he had so much sugar in his system that he had diminished capacity. I think after that, the state passed laws about diminished capacity, and basically you cannot put on in federal court a defense that you had diminished capacity. There's something called diminished actuality. It's all very confusing. It'll be briefed by the lawyers. But I think part of what they want to do is just the 12 jurors are sitting there. It was interesting to see who's on the jury. When you're actually there, you can see that. But they want the jurors, I think, to just sort of see Tom Girardi in court and kind of draw their own conclusions from seeing him. But like I said, he said something in an audible whisper. He didn't say something crazy. He said something that kind of made sense, like take that up there. When he went up to cross-examine the witness, Tom said something like, take that up there, meaning a particular book. Take that book up there with you. And the Times reported that he said loud enough that people could hear it in the courtroom. I wasn't there yet, Mark, but he said loud enough that people could hear it in the courtroom to his public defender. He's not paying fees. He's got the public defender appointed on after this life of the rich and famous that he led. He's got the public defender. He says to his public defender, and this was reported by the Times, I didn't hear it, don't treat me like a child. I know what's going on. Which, I suppose if you were drawing this up, right, just, drawing this up and thinking what would be the optimal situation would be that he sit there and not make statements
and not say anything. Sure.
People can hear. And at least some people who are there have reported that they think if you're actually there and you watch him day in and day out, that you would not have much doubt that he is in fact competent. Let me say one other thing. The events happened from 2010 to 2020.
Please, because I feel like we've gotten so far afield, and for those who may not know the case, this guy's accused of stealing $15 million from clients, and these are burn victims and people who were came to him in their hour of need. I just want to be clear what we're talking about here.
Yes. Well, can I? Do we have time to be very brief?
Yeah. Please go ahead. Please go ahead. But I just wanted to make that point. Go ahead.
He was a famous personal injury lawyer. Now, personal injury is everything from a car crash, or you can have a case against PG&E that involves $50 million. Tom Girardi had the kind of cases back in the period 2010, let's say, to 2015, where he got those kinds of cases. He's also the attorney who is sort of featured or mentioned in Erin Brockovich, the famous movie with Julia Roberts. So after that, he had this huge practice. It was enhanced by the fact that he could tell people, I'm the Erin Brockovich lawyer. He also sought out a huge amount of publicity, which a lot of lawyers do. He got himself featured in all these things like Super Lawyers. He was the cover on Super Lawyers. No, he didn't have a cape on, but he got himself in the Super Lawyers thing, and he got himself on the cover. And according to the witnesses who I saw testify at the initial meeting, he would give all this propaganda about himself. He'd give the Super Lawyers with the cover, and he'd give this LA magazine that he was in. And this was a horrible accident, as you say. The particular person here, Rudy Gomez, I think I'm saying it right. He was the person who was burned. So he's in San Bruno. I guess he has an accident, in his apartment or house. He's burned terribly. His girlfriend is killed. He's in a coma for a couple of months. He has a very clear case against PG&E. The mom goes around to 4 or 5 different law firms. She eventually hires Girardi's law firm. And according to the testimony, they eventually make a deal. He's agreeing to work for 25%, which is it's a strict liability case. So that's a very fair fee if you're going to get a huge recovery that looks like it's in the area of tens of millions of dollars. So he's going to get a 25% fee. They go up to San Francisco Bay Area. They're in front of a former justice of the California Supreme Court, who's the mediator. Girardi, according to the testimony, runs to this family and says, I got you this great settlement. Sign here. This is fantastic. It's wonderful. Sign here. You're going to get millions of dollars. They sign on the signature page. Where's the settlement? The whole settlement. We're going to get that in a minute. This we got to do this. Blah, 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 blah. According to their testimony, Girardi kind of rushes them, and they never do get the settlement agreement. For years and years go by while they pester Girardi to get the settlement agreement. He gives them a bunch of stories. The prosecutor shows the different stories, things that Girardi himself wrote to them, or voicemails that Girardi himself left on the phone. Girardi's defense, it's obvious from the cross-examination, is that this faithless accountant there stole the money. He stole $50 million. He's got a severed trial mark. And that was a big ruling by this judge. Which
means that they'll try the accountants separately.
I think she was exactly right on the law. Some people may not like the law, but that's the law that, if the accountant had gone to trial with Girardi, the prosecutor's there trying to convict the accountant. And guess what? Girardi's in the same courtroom in the same trial trying to convict the accountant. It would be like having 2 prosecutors against you. In those situations, we sever out the other defendant. But of course, what that leaves is the other dude did it. Girardi's defense is to point all the blame at the accountant who's not there and say that he took $50 million, he controlled the books. So one of the questions that they asked that they kept asking these two victims. So the two that I saw the son, who was the first witness for the government, the one who was terribly injured. And I can say this, human recovery is wonderful. I saw him on the stand and I thought he testified quite well. And when he walked out, he didn't have a wheelchair. He didn't walk, he walked with a limp. But, thank God, how much he's recovered. And they are pretty much going to get the money. They are pretty much going to get the money that they were entitled to. But the idea is that Girardi had no business keeping their money, telling them all these stories, not paying them. They eventually had to hire another law firm. There's a whole issue with the other law firm. They're trying to make it look like the mom is just litigious. She's not happy with anybody. That's obviously what the defense is going to be. But there'll be 4 instances, Mark. So it's not just this one. Then the next witness, who was yesterday afternoon, is someone whose husband died in a boating accident. She was going to recover $500,000. She says that Girardi also played games with her, allegedly didn't pay her the money, gave her the big runaround. And then the next 2 witnesses for the other 2 counts are going to be people in totally different cases who are going to say the same thing. They didn't get the money. They got a big runaround.
Yeah.
And
so you've got a burn victim, a widow whose husband died in a tragic boating accident, a woman injured by a medical device, another woman harmed in an auto accident. Just as David is talking about, you've got all of these various things. Let me just mention the money, because it is at the center of all of this, because the suggestion is that he took $15 million, put it in his own pocket. And as you've heard David say, no, that was my CFO. He did it. I did nothing, is what the defendant's saying. But the prosecution is saying he treated the client trust account like a personal piggy bank. 2 private jets, jewelry, country club fees, a mansion in Pasadena, a home in Palm Springs. The funds pocketed from clients underwrote an exorbitant lifestyle, according to prosecutors, that an additional $20 million from the firm's bank account went to the entertainment career of his now estranged wife, Erica Girardi. She was the star of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. So, I mean, boy, when you lay it out like that, it does seem like there's a lot of money floating around, and it's wild that the clients who were involved in various litigation didn't get that money in a prompt way.
Well, there's a famous part of this case. There's many famous parts of this case. But one of it is what they call the widows and orphans. This is I think it was Lion Air aviation disaster, where people died and left, of course, widows and orphans who recovered a huge amount. They've apparently been paid by some insurance fund, but at least the allegation is that Girardi and his firm didn't pay those widows and orphans. That was also part of the money that allegedly was embezzled, taken out of the trust account. And another part of Girardi's alleged crimes were in, I think, the Detroit area. And that case is going to federal court. And I think he and a couple of other defendants, it may be that CFO, it may be someone else, they're all going to face the music in Detroit federal court in yet a different federal trial. So that's another aspect of this. And then, of course, his personal history, he was about 60 when he goes into Chasen's, a beautiful old restaurant in Los Angeles, where, what's his name? Charlton Heston was famous for eating there all the time. I managed to go there a couple of times back in the day. It's not there anymore. He's in there and he meets a server who is this Erica Jane. And they end up getting married, and he supposedly supports her entertainment career to the tune of millions of dollars. I think her side of it is that she never got any money. The prosecutor's side of it is that, wait a second, all of her bills were paid by Girardi Keese. So wouldn't that be nice to run up millions of dollars of bills, not get any money, but all of your millions of dollars of bills to promote your career are being paid for? They're now either estranged or divorced. But his story is that now that he's 85 years old. But I want to say this, because I'm always sympathetic to the defense. I'm a criminal defense lawyer right now. But the allegations are from 2010 to about 2020. And so they asked the people, did you notice any diminution of his, cognitive ability, of his speaking ability, anything about it during the period of time he represented you and those things were happening? And they said no. And I think every one of those witnesses is going to say no. So the argument that, well, he's lost a step and you should be sympathetic, well, that's maybe a sentencing argument, right? if he gets found guilty.
But it's not going to be enough to get him
Yeah.
off the hook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's not the man. He's not the man that he used to be. He's not the lawyer he used to be. But during the relevant period of time, Mark, for whether he had a problem forming intent or anything like that, they're going to say that he was mentally and physically fit as a fiddle throughout the time that all of these alleged victims dealt with him.
You know, it's a huge case, and we have to wrap up. But it really bums me out that these lawyers who take up these cases for people who have righteous cases against big companies like the San Bruno case or like any one of these various personal injury cases, it really bums me out that that money wouldn't make it to the victims. It bummed me out in the Avenatti case, and now in what's alleged in this Girardi case. It just sucks, you know, and it really only reinforces the kind of a sleazy PI, particularly the personal injury attorney kind of reputation that can often follow these guys, you know, David?
Well, you know, it's bummed out the State Bar of California, and some people say that they've actually overreacted. Girardi has been the reason why there's this huge scrutiny of attorney-client trust accounts. And it applies to like everybody in the bar. It applies to someone like me. I'm not a personal injury lawyer. I don't have clients' funds. And you know, if you
just to be clear about that, means you have to put the funds in these various trust accounts in order to protect them.
It's not your money. It's the client's
it's not
money.
your money.
And you better not touch it. And you better keep a good accounting of it. And I get all of that. It makes an awful lot of sense. And but you know, they've, as I say, a lot of people think that they've overreacted, and now just, you know, this is how you get not the proper regulation, but the overregulation. And if you add 5%, you know, charges to people because you have to hire people, you have to do more work, guess what? That gets passed on to the clients. Then the clients say, why are legal fees so high? You know what I'm saying, Mark? But this has created the Girardi rule, which has made for different, more state bar reporting requirements throughout the state. This has been a huge, huge case. Part of his story, and he didn't know any or influence any federal judges, but his story was that he had huge influence, not only with politicians, but with judges. And he would have all this patter about how, you know, he had lunch with the judge and this and that and the other thing. And I would just say to anybody out there, if you get that kind of, you know, smarmy, you know, thing, I'm so on the inside, I'm so plugged in, I'm so connected, all of that, take it with a big grain of salt. You know, look, see what your attorney's results are, your prospective attorney's results are. You know, in my own case, I've won an awful lot of cases. I mean, you can look it up, you can find the cases. I have gotten acquittals and dismissals, and you can look up the cases. Federal cases are the easiest thing in the world to track and what the results were. Look up as much as you can for any attorney that you're going, and your best friend, you know, one of these, I think this person, one of them went to the lawyer because their best friend, you know, all that kind of stuff. Be careful who your best friend is sending you to, or somebody that you meet, or some paralegal that you meet, or something.
Yeah. You want to vet them. Debbie is asking way out of time, but
do your due diligence.
David, can a client monitor their account that the lawyer sets up?
You can certainly ask to. The problem that these family members that I saw testify yesterday, the problem that they had was that they wrote letters. They pestered Girardi for information. And he kept giving them what they say are not only stories, but allegedly false stories. And the government showed one after the other. You know, Justice Pinelli, this is a constant area of concern for Justice Pinelli and me. We're talking all the time about, with all the drug problems you had, that you shouldn't have all this money. Well, Pinelli wasn't even on. I mean, it was a year and a half past those things happened. So they say, and another thing that Girardi supposedly said was that we need additional court orders. I can't release the money to you because I have to get certain court orders. And the prosecution is going to prove that allegedly there were no more court orders that needed to be obtained. It was just a stalling tactic. And the prosecutors have suggested that while the money is very hard to track, the money had been spent on wine, women, and song, right? Private jets. This was not a normal attorney's lifestyle. You know, private jets, a mansion in Pasadena, another residence out in Palm Springs.
I mean, that's what makes this case so high profile, is the degree of decadence that was associated with the money. Same thing is true of Avenatti. You know, remember, he took a bunch of money and he had his own Formula One race car and all that. I mean, it really got way out of hand. I mean, the bad lawyers really, really
Mark,
go nuts.
Avenatti and I were on CNN together back in 2018, and I had parked my car on the way out, and I was having trouble using Avenatti was on so much, he knew exactly how to slip his card in and out, but I had to, fidget with my card, and he's back there in whatever it was, the Ferrari. He was back there in the Ferrari. He's kind of giving me that look. And I said, I'm doing this as fast as I can, Mr. Avenatti. That was my,
that's really great.
I was on the air with him a couple of times, and now
he was on everywhere. He was being talked about as a potential presidential candidate because he was a good smack talker on television. Hey, he did seem to have a great profile until the curtain was pulled back.
Mark, I think it was mainly himself who was talking about himself.
Oh, is that? Well, it fooled me. David, I'm so out of time. Thank you for weighing in on a bunch of stuff, and I'm looking forward to our next visit. Again, David Katz, find him here on Thursdays, but across the English-speaking world. And I like that you underscored the Hunter Biden thing again today, because it makes total sense that will have, even as his trial begins, the new trial begins. The other thing that we can focus on is after November, the inevitability of a pardon that will be issued to him. So thanks again, David Katz. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you. And people can follow the Girardi trial. It's going to be in the LA Times, I think, just about every day, and in some other media.
Oh, I think we'll update it with you next week again. Thanks, pal.
Great.
Okay, all the best. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.